Welcome everybody to the Professional Development Summit. Happy Friday. We are so excited for you to be spending some time with us today. My name is Brett McGrath. I lead our marketing team here at Dyknow and am really excited for the group of panelists that we have, and especially our keynote that we will get to here shortly. It's crazy. I was reflecting back on all of these events, and this is our third event in the series of the last 3 months. So we've been hosting these events all while everybody's been stuck at home trying to figure out remote learning and or distance learning, or whatever your school or school district is calling it. And it's been, we've had tons of conversations, and there's been a lot of challenges and obstacles, but one thing we've continued to hear is that events like this matter, and they're helpful, and they give educators ideas on how to think about their roles and how to think about communication and collaboration, and better serving those schools, districts, and students that they are in. So we're really excited for today's event. Today, we're going to be talking about the past, present, and the future of professional development, especially in light of remote learning. I know everyone is almost crossing that finish line for the spring semester, and we'll be looking towards the fall semester. And our hope is that you will be able to take away one or two things that you learned in this conversation today, and you can apply those to how you're thinking about your professional development or building those PD plans out. So it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be inspirational. So we're so excited that you've all taken some time out of your day to join us. I'll kick it over to you, Tiara, to talk about the event expectations and lineup.
Thanks, Brett. Hi, everyone. My name is Tiara. You've probably received some emails from me leading up to this with event information. I'll be your host and event facilitator today. We're so excited to have you and be holding this professional development event. So today we have a great lineup of keynote, presenter, and panelists. Pearl Arredondo will be our keynote speaker starting here in just a little bit. And then we're going to be having a panel discussion with Dr. Eric Youngman, Dr. Amy Sharp, Deborah Jacoby, and Jacob Standish. So these are all great tech coaches and tech leaders in the ed tech space who have diverse backgrounds and also a lot of different experiences with remote learning and professional development. So we're excited to have a great conversation with them today. We'll go into some introductions for these people a little later so that you can get a little more background into who they are and what their experience is. To give you all an overview of what you can expect from today's event, as with all of our events, this stream is being recorded. So this whole conversation will be recorded, and we will make it available to all registrants after the event. So if you are unable to attend live, or you can only drop in for the keynote or the panel discussion, no worries. We're happy to have you for a small portion of the event, and we'll send the recording to you afterwards via email. Please use the TechCoachCon hashtag for discussions on Twitter throughout the event. As you've probably noticed, the chat is not available to you to use in the Zoom, so we encourage you to direct all your discussions, questions, topics, and thoughts to Twitter using that hashtag. We get a ton of engagement on there, so we would love to hear all of your thoughts. It's great to see everyone connecting, and it kind of becomes a PLN for 2 hours during this event. So please blow up the TechCoachCon chat. We love seeing all of that in Twitter. Q&A, I already covered chat, not available during this webinar, but for Q&A, please submit any questions that you have for us about logistics about the event, or for Pearl, or for our panelists throughout the event. So submit those in the Q&A tool. We will answer those either through chat. Mimi, our intern for the summer, will be answering any logistical questions that you have, and we'll also answer questions live with our panelists and Pearl at the end of the discussion and the keynote. So throw those questions in there if you have them. And then last but not least, we will be providing a certificate of attendance for anyone who wants to request PD credit from their school or district for attending this event. So we will provide you with a link following the event along with the recording that you can ask a few questions, and we will send you that certificate of attendance. So once again, we're really happy to have you. Brett, I'll throw it back to you for some housekeeping before we throw it to Pearl.
Yes, thank you, Tiara. So we would not be doing our job if we weren't promoting and talking about other things that we were doing. So that's what we're going to share. Definitely wanted to shout out Tackling Tech. Tackling Tech, if you're not aware, is the podcast that we've been working on since these digital events have been kicked off. It's been an incredible way for me to learn about you and your roles and how you're approaching those on a day-to-day basis. And really what we're trying to do is provide a platform for people like you to get to share their stories about the good, bad, and the ugly. We've talked a lot about remote learning over the last several months because that's what's relevant and that's what a lot of people are thinking about. So definitely go check out Tackling Tech. We're in all of your favorite podcast listening platforms. Hit that subscribe button, leave that 5-star review. That's so helpful. And just to reiterate the Tech Coach Con hashtag, I encourage you to use that. We look back on that and it's an amazing resource for us. And to be honest, a lot of the people that we've got on Tackling Tech have been from people that are using that hashtag. So it's a great way for us to get to know you and build those relationships. So definitely go check out Tackling Tech. We drop new content and new episodes every Tuesday. Some of the other things we are doing, if you move to the next slide. So we are kicking off in the next couple weeks, the Tech Coach Corner YouTube series. If you're attending this event, you'll get notifications on what that means. But we've decided to really get down in the weeds and talk tactical with our tech coaches in our audience and have them share some tips on different things that they're doing on a day-to-day basis when they're thinking about their roles. Tackling Tech has been kind of that high-level, inspirational, motivational type storytelling that we're sharing. And really this YouTube series will begin to be an outlet for more tactical ideas and information sharing. So I will not be the host of this. That will be Tiara. So you'll get to listen to and see Tiara instead of me, which is, I think, better for everybody. So we're really excited about that. And then the last one. So we've got a PLN that we've created that we're really getting off the ground now, and we'd love for you to join, especially if you're engaged in consuming our content here. So join the Tech Coach Con Facebook group. You can find it, just go to Facebook Technology Coaching Conference, join the group. You'll have to answer a few questions, but really it's a good opportunity to connect with other people in similar roles and share information. So go check that out. Everyone's on Facebook and it's an easy place for you to join. Let's get into it. Let's see here. If we'd advance to the next slide. Okay. All right. I'm super excited to introduce our keynote speaker. First, before we introduce Pearl, I got to share the story of how Pearl came into our audience. It was, I think, about a month ago on a Friday. We were building and developing this event, and we were trying to think about what messages that we wanted to share with our audience members. And we wanted to make it relevant based on the current time and all of the circumstances that everyone was dealing with. And it was a Friday afternoon. It was like 2:30. I was about to go for a walk outside. I had been back-to-back Zoom meetings all day. I just started to go down that Google rabbit hole. And I started hitting pages. And then all of a sudden, I ended up on a TED Talk. And it was a TED Talk that Pearl was doing. And the title of the TED Talk, as a marketer, the headline grabbed my attention. It was "My Story from Gangland Daughter to Star Teacher." And so I thought, well, that's interesting. I'm going to watch this video. It was like 7 minutes. After I watched the video, immediately it struck me based on what she was sharing, overcoming her current circumstances, not trying to go with the status quo, but thinking about personalized learning, thinking about the student first. There was a passion to what she was talking about. And I shared that link with Tiara and I said, this is someone we've got to track down. We've got to get Pearl to be the keynote at the Professional Development Summit. And so what we did was reach out. And this is a recommendation to everyone in the audience. Sometimes you just have to ask. So I shared the story of how Pearl came in, how we stumbled across this video, and I reached out to Pearl, and Pearl responded back, said, yeah, let's talk about it. And here we are today. So since then, we've been in several conversations. I actually recorded an episode of Tackling Tech with our audience that will be aired soon. But just to give you a quick highlight on Pearl, Pearl became a teacher at San Fernando Middle School, which led to her establishing the school's Multimedia Academy. After establishing the Multimedia Academy, she helped found San Fernando Institute, for Applied Media, where she aided in reforming the current school system and where she is the principal. So without further ado, I introduce to you today's keynote speaker for the Professional Development Summit, Pearl Arredondo. Welcome, Pearl.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm super excited to be able to share my story and where we are right now. And, also learn from everybody, because I think I too am trying to navigate all of these pieces. So give me 1 second. All right, are we ready to go? So just to give you a little bit of background of my story, I did grow up in East Los Angeles, and this was a time where everyone spoke Spanish. I only spoke Spanish at the beginning. I didn't speak English. If you notice some of the pictures with my sister, the graffiti was an everyday norm to us. I didn't seem to notice it. And I danced folklorico. I was very proud of my culture. I was proud of who I was. And we were the first innovators as well. We made our own swing out of a rope and a pillow. So see, maker space already. These were my parents. And so when you have a dad who looks like this, you definitely don't have sunshines and rainbows every day. And my mom used to also be a gang member at the beginning until she had children. And then she realized, maybe this isn't quite the path that I need to take. And so as she started to pull away, my dad was still high in the streets. And so I really didn't notice it though, because every one of my friends, their dads were gang members, their parents were involved. And in a sense, I almost felt protected. I could walk through the street as an elementary school kid. I could walk to the store and not feel afraid. Nothing would happen. There were always bodyguards around reporting back, oh, that's this person's daughter. Like, don't mess with her. And so I was fine. I didn't see anything wrong with it. That was my world. And in elementary school, I had Miss Hirschkoff. She was my 5th grade teacher. And she realized that there was more to me than meets the eye, I guess you could say. And she would go above and beyond, like many teachers do. And so one day she decided that she was going to come to my house to talk to my mom. So can you imagine? She's knocking on my door. I'm playing dress up with my sister. And all of a sudden my mom's like, it's your teacher. I freaked out. She looked at me like, what did you do? Like, I swear I didn't do anything. And so my teacher comes in and she talks to my mom about putting me on a school bus to go to a school about an hour away. And that's with Los Angeles traffic. It really was only about 20 miles, but with LA traffic, it's an hour. And so my mom's like, but she's only in 5th grade. Like, how is she gonna get on this school bus at 5:30 in the morning and have to be all the way over there? Like, what's gonna happen? And she's like, no, she has to go. Because if she goes to the current middle school, it was gang infested. She's like, she's gonna fall through the cracks and she's not gonna make it. That school is not for her. And so my mom thought about it and she's like, are you sure? Are you ready? I was like, I'm ready, let's do it. And so 5:30 in the morning, we were there waiting for a bus to go to the other side of town. And this is the culture shock that I endured. So the first picture is my house. It was a 1-bedroom little tiny shack. You can see the boards on the windows. We had 2 beds put together. It was our version of the California King. We slept like sardines. And all of a sudden, I was going to a neighborhood with manicured lawns, 2-story houses. I was like, whoa, these are real? Like, this exists? I thought that was only in the movies. But here I was at this new school in this new community, and the students were amazing. There were students from all different backgrounds. As in my school before, it was all predominantly Latino. Everybody was like me. But now I was learning new languages. I was learning words in Persian, and I was learning some Mandarin, and I was so excited. But not everybody was excited. See, because what I didn't know was that the way that I was able to go to that school was because my school district had lost a lawsuit. And it was mandatory school integration. They figured, let's take the kids from the ghetto and let's bus them out to the more wealthier schools. And that's what they did. So not all of the adults were very happy to see us there. Not all of the adults were as welcoming as the children and the students. And so it really made you think, like, well, why? And sometimes the teachers would make it pretty obvious. They would say, if I got a really good grade on one of my tests, they would say, oh, did you get the answers from someone in the period before? And I would be like, well, no, I studied. You know, I care about this class and this test. And they were like, sure, okay. And they wouldn't really believe me. And then other teachers were super supportive. And when I was getting a really low grade in my history class, because we had to do current events every single week, and this was from a newspaper, but this was before the internet was there. So you had to walk down the street to get a newspaper, put 35 cents in there. Well, in my neighborhood, there were no newspapers in those dispensers. And so I couldn't really get one. And because money was so tight, I didn't want to ask my mom for 35 cents every single week, especially when I was already going to the liquor store, trying to get credit for milk and bread, and then asking them, okay, well, can my mom pay you at the end of the week? You know, and trying to negotiate those deals. So asking her for a newspaper wasn't going to happen. So my grades started slipping. So one of my teachers, she's like, why are you letting your grades slip? And I was like, well, because I can't get a newspaper. She's like, so you couldn't ask a teacher? You couldn't go to the main office that gets the paper delivered every single day? You couldn't take one of those? You couldn't ask a friend to bring you a piece of the newspaper that they probably did their homework from? And I was like, well, I didn't think of that. I'm in 6th grade. Those are not options that I'm thinking about. And she's like, just because you can't figure out, just because you can't do it the same way that everybody else does, doesn't mean that it's not possible. And it was then that really it started to click, like, yeah, you're right. Like I can't do the same things that everybody else does in the same manner, but I'm also not going to just let it slip away because I can't. And I had to start finding new solutions. Because the reality was that, you know, what fault was it of mine that policymakers decided that this was the solution for integration? I was just a kid. And what fault was it of mine that my mom was trying to do everything she possibly could, but she was still poor? I was just a kid. And what fault was it of mine that I wanted to do so much better and more than my community could offer me? I was just a kid. And so their messages started to become loud and clear when we went on a field trip to the tide pools in Malibu by the beach. We passed by Pepperdine University, and I was in awe. I absolutely wanted to go to this school. I was already picturing myself sitting there with the wind in my hair. I was like, oh, I'm coming here. And I asked the teacher, I was like, what school is that? And he's like, well, that's Pepperdine University. But kids like you don't go there. Kids like me. How come kids like me? And I was like, oh, kids like me. That's right. He met my father once. He knows that I get bussed in, that I don't actually live there. Kids like me. And all these little hints were subtle for a long time. And I don't think because I was young, it started to shake me up in the sense that I didn't know where I belonged. I didn't know if I was going to be that gangster kid. I didn't know if I was going to be the one who was college bound. And it took a while. And so I want to show you a little video. This is called The Bear That Wasn't. And it's from Facing History and Ourselves. And think about what the messaging behind this. And we'll talk a little bit about this right when it's over.
Once upon a time, in fact, it was on a Tuesday, the bear saw that it was time to go into a cave and hibernate. And that was just what he did. Not long afterward, in fact, it was on a Wednesday, lots of workers arrived near that cave. While the bear slept, they built a great, huge factory. As winter turned to spring, the bear awoke and stepped out of his cave. His eyes popped. Where was the forest? Where was the grass? Where were the trees? Where were the flowers? What had happened? I must be dreaming, he said. Of course I'm dreaming. But it wasn't a dream. It was real. Just then, the foreman came out of the factory. Hey, you! Get back to work, he said. The bear replied, I don't work here. I'm a bear. The foreman laughed. That's a fine excuse for a man to keep from doing any work, saying he's a bear. The bear said, but I am a bear. The foreman stopped laughing. He was very mad. Don't try to fool me, he said. You're not a bear. You're a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. I'm going to take you to the general manager. The general manager also insisted the bear was a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. The bear said, no, you're mistaken. I am a bear. The general manager was very mad too. The bear said, I'm sorry to hear you say that. You see, I am a bear. The third vice president was even madder. The second vice president was more than mad or madder. He was furious. The first vice president yelled in rage. He said, you're not a bear. You're a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. I'm going to take you to the president. The bear pleaded, this is a dreadful error, you know, because ever since I can remember, I've always been a bear. And that's exactly what the bear told the president. Thank you for telling me, the president said. You can't be a bear. Bears are only in a zoo or a circus. They're never inside a factory, and that's where you are, inside a factory. So how can you be a bear? The bear said, but I am a bear. The president said, not only are you a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat, but you are also very stubborn. So I'm going to prove it to you once and for all that you are not a bear. The bear said, but I am a bear. The president packed his vice presidents and the bear into a car and they drove to the zoo. Bears at the zoo said the bear was not a bear because if he were a bear, he would be inside a cage. The bear said, but I am a bear. So they all left the zoo and they drove to the nearest circus. Is he a bear? The president asked the circus bears. The bear said no. If he were a bear, he would be wearing a little hat with a striped ribbon, holding onto a balloon and riding a bicycle. The bear said, but I am a bear. When the president and his vice presidents returned to the factory, they put the bear to work on a big machine with lots of other men. The bear worked on the big machine for many, many months. After a long, long time, the factory closed and all the workers went away. The bear was the last one left. And as he left the shut-down factory, he saw geese flying south and leaves falling from the trees. Winter was coming, he thought. It was time to hibernate. He found a cave and was about to enter when he stopped. I can't go in a cave. I'm not a bear. I'm a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. As the days grew colder and the snow fell, the bear sat shivering with cold. I wish I were a bear, he thought. Then suddenly he got up, walked through the deep snow toward the cave. Inside it was cozy and snug. The icy wind and the cold, cold snow couldn't reach him there. He felt warm all over. He sank down on a bed of pine boughs and soon he was happily asleep and dreaming sweet dreams, just like all bears do when they hibernate. So even though the foreman and the general manager and the third vice president and the second vice president and the first vice president and the president and the zoo bears and the circus bears had said he was a silly man who needed a shave and wore a fur coat, I don't think he really believed it. Do you? No, indeed, he knew he wasn't a silly man, and he wasn't a silly bear either.
And so for a long time, I was that bear. You get so many mixed messages, and as a kid, you don't know how to navigate that. You don't know what to figure out, who you are or where you're going. And so I fell into the trap in middle school of those messages of I was just the daughter of a gangster. I was going to be the next statistic. I was not going to be the college-bound student. And I played into it. I ditched school, I was not doing well, I was getting into all kinds of mischief. And then finally, I was getting into high school and was realizing that college was going to be my ticket. The only way that I was going to escape my community or my circumstances were to be able to go away to college. And so I did everything that I could to try to get into advanced placement classes. I was starting to do all of my work, but I also moved and had a job and had to commute. I was driving now and then having to drive 45 minutes to school. So at that time, the policy of my high school was if you were late, then you had to go into this tank, this holding tank, which they called tardy lockout. So even if I was 30 seconds, a minute late, I still had to go there. So my first period class was an honors English class, but senior year, I wanted that AP lit class. Well, the teacher said, no, there's only spaces for 20 kids and you don't seem like you have it together. Like you don't care enough about this class because you're absent. And I'm like, but I'm commuting and I'm trying to do all of this stuff for this class. And she was like, no, you seem to have a chip on your shoulder and you think you can get whatever you want. I was like, wow, clearly this teacher had no idea what my life was like. And she didn't care either. And I was like, okay, fine. So I ended up in an AP class in the regular school. So we had a magnet program, which was the college-bound students, and then like the regular school students. Well, in this regular class, there were about 40-something kids in there. And we didn't have nearly all the resources that the magnet students had. They had all of the advanced placement books, novels, everything you could think of. So when I asked the teacher, I said, well, where are all of our materials? How are we supposed to pass this test? And she said, well, they're not really expecting you to pass the test. They're just saying they offered you the class. I was like, but this isn't going to work. Like, I have to get into college. And she was like, well, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. So I marched myself into that magnet office and I was like, well, there's 10 of us in here that are from the magnet program. I need at least 10 copies. And then we'll figure it out from there. We'll share, we'll photocopy, we'll do whatever we need to do. And they kind of looked at me sideways like, why are you coming in here? And I was like, I need to pass this test. It's important. And so they conferred and they went and talked in their office and they come out and they're like, well, how many kids do you have? I was like, well, there's about 40 something of us. And they're like, all right, we'll give you a copy for each person in your class. I was like, what? Really? Wow. Okay, awesome. So I go back to class and I'm like, we're going to get a copy for everybody. And she was like, how did you do that? I asked. I was like, have you ever asked? Like, that was kind of it. There was no real big miracle in it. And I think it was at that point that I really realized, like, I had to be that advocate for kids like me. I had to ask because sometimes that's all it takes in order to move things forward. And so, of course, getting out of high school, I had to apply at Pepperdine. But getting into Pepperdine, I thought was super hard. No, getting out was even harder. I was living in tutoring labs. My version of prepared, at least for my high school, was not at the same level of prepared that other students were coming from. And so it really makes you think about, well, what are we doing in schools and in certain communities to prepare kids? And so when I finished my degree, I knew that I had to go back to my middle school so that I could teach, because I wanted to make sure that kids like me were prepared for those advanced placement classes for college. And so when I got back there though, things were in turmoil. There were about 2,600 students. There were trash can fires. There were disarray during lots of fights. They would cut lunch short. It was a mess. And it's like, well, who did this? How did this happen? Like, it wasn't like that when I came to school there. And so we knew that we had to do something, but what? And so once a new administration came in, we figured out that we needed to break up this big school into smaller academies. And so as a new teacher and super energetic and innovative, I was like, let's do a technology academy. And I remember the administrator laughing and saying, well, isn't technology supposed to be what every kid does? I said, yeah, but that's not what they're doing. And in fact, our school doesn't even have technology for every single kid in this school. I was like, so we have to start somewhere. I was like, and I'm not talking just, learning how to type and word process. Like, I want real stuff. I want kids making movies. I want kids collaborating. I want kids figuring out how to create things. And they were just like, I don't know about that. They're like, okay, we'll give you a shot. We're going to give you a small academy, maybe about 100 kids, 150 kids. And I was like, all right, well, he's like, but you have to do your own recruiting and your own marketing. You got it. So we started marketing, and before you knew it, we had over 300 applications for our academy. And I was like, here you go. What are you going to do? Just leave me at 100? And he was like, all right, nope, you proved your case. So we were running a small academy, about 350 students. And it started to work. You know, we were able to get to know our kids. We were able to see where they were going to go for the next grade level, talk to those teachers and say, okay, these are their strengths, these are their weaknesses, and this is our plan for moving them forward. We would get to know families. We would have events where we were getting a lot of engagement, and we were moving our test scores. But unfortunately, it wasn't fast enough. So we did get hit with what is called public school choice. And so our district decided that anybody could write in a plan to take over the lowest performing schools. And we were one of them. And so you had charter organizations, nonprofit organizations, everybody was writing in proposals and plans for how they could improve this particular school. And so initially, we were going to write a plan for 4 solid academies because we had 7. And the reality was that not all 7 were functioning the way they probably should have. So we were like, let's cut it down to 4 thematic academies running stronger and smoother. Well, new administration comes in with a different idea. And they're like, no, let's go back. Let's get rid of all the academies and let's go back to the big comprehensive. We're like, no, but we've done that, been there, done that. It didn't work. We had too many kids falling through the cracks. Like, we can't do that. And they're like, no, that's the plan that we're going to go. I was like, well, if anybody can write in a plan, then so are we. So as a multimedia academy and the teachers, there were 7 of us, we decided to write our own proposal. And we only had a few months to do it, but we started to put our dream school onto paper. We're like, every single thing that we could possibly envision being the perfect school and the perfect conditions for us to teach in, that's what we wrote about. And so that's how the San Fernando Institute for Applied Media was born. We wrote our plan, and then by February of 2010, our plan was approved, and we opened our doors in September. And so that was 10 years ago, and it's rather exciting. And we knew that when we started this school that we had to activate students and families. We didn't want to maintain the status quo. We had to radically reform it and change it up. And so we identified our priority areas. We knew we wanted a strong instructional program, a positive school culture, and we wanted parent engagement. Now, the reality is all these 3 things have to happen all at the same time. But our professional development at this time really focused on that positive school culture. And it focused on the positive behavior supports. Because if students are not in the right mindset and they are not really ready to receive that instruction, it doesn't matter how beautiful your lesson plan is. It doesn't matter how rigorous your instruction is. They're just not going to do it. So we focused on relationships. We focused on ensuring that we built the foundation in order to bring in that rigor, in order to bring in the next step. And so here's a little example of how we build in that positive school culture. We focus on personalization, ensuring that we have high expectations, high engagement, and we foster relationships. This year, we began with camp-style rotations, where we focused on positive behavior support, identity, and success in the classroom. The positive behavior support rotation gave students an opportunity to learn about our school-wide expectations known as the 4 Ps: be prompt, prepared, productive, and polite. On one of the days, staff put on skits that demonstrated what each expectation looked like in various contexts.
But I'm going to dedicate a page to this Starbucks Mocha Frappuccino with vanilla soy latte. And I'll see you up in the morning.
The identity rotation allowed students to explore their own stories, their own core values, and how they each contributed to our SFIM family.
If you like some working groups, come to the line.
We kicked off this section by me sharing my own personal story of struggle, success, and how we all need some help along the way. The success in middle school rotation focused on growth mindset and strategies of time management, study skills, and work ethic. The goal was for students to understand that success takes planning and work.
Now, next up, encouragers. What do you think the encouragers do? Tell me.
Overall, these rotations gave our entire school a shared experience that teachers are able to reference throughout the year. By building a strong school climate and culture, High makes school worth coming to. Students know they matter to each of us. Always going to be a safe place where they get the support they need. So these boot camp rotations, we start our year off every year this way. And so now we're really starting to figure out, okay, what does this look like in a virtual setting? And so when we looked at curriculum, we knew we wanted to do project-based learning in a STEAM style. And so we focused on the communication, collaboration, critical thinking, creativity. But the real world application is what really mattered to us because we wanted our students to feel invested. And so a lot of our projects were social justice themed. For example, we had something where, what does social injustice look like today? And students had to do a walking field trip within our community and find out what does that look like, do the research, and then what's a possible solution? How do you connect that to community-based organizations that are out there fighting for these things? And so building in that connection engages students. And so we also have them do like a real world Shark Tank. They have to create their own model and then they create their prototype, they bring it to market. They write their business plan and then they have to share it in front of the sharks. So we get community members to come and they become the sharks who want to purchase part of their company. So they have to know, well, if someone's willing to give you money, but for 50% of your company, is that worth it? And so it's putting them in those situations to be able to really pursue their ideas and have that confidence also to be able to speak in front of other people. And so we created a makerspace out of building this project-based learning model within our school. And it became like the natural progression because teachers were already doing this within their classrooms. And we knew that we needed something bigger, something better. And most schools in wealthy neighborhoods already had makerspaces. And so when it came time for us to build one, we got a lot of pushback. It was like, well, wait a minute, well, you can't use school funds that way. Well, why not? It's curriculum. It's the same way. And so it's having to kind of go through that same bureaucracy and explain why it is that we need this. And so now we are the advanced prototype site for all of Los Angeles Unified School District. So that's pretty amazing. So let me show you a little clip as to what our makerspace looks like.
I'm Audrey Luna.
And I'm Crystal Casas. We're part of the Makerspace, and Mr. Fuentes has two different Makerspace rooms. One is for robotics, and the other is for engineering and design.
In Ms. Merrick's Makerspace room, it's all about digital storytelling.
And then check out this website. Where am I? Where am I? Let me out.
Whoa, Jason, how did you get in there?
Hello, I'm Mr. Fuentes, and this is the Makerspace. It's a place where kids come and explore all kinds of possibilities. They learn to use basic tools to put together models of anything, really. Science toys, science concepts. They use math. They use also the language arts as well to create reports and things like that. They create works of art. They create all kinds of contraptions that they can think of. And at the same time, they can fix devices that are broken And one of the most important things here is to just be creative, explore possibilities and use your hands.
One of the makerspace rooms is robotics. Challenge was to make a robot nice and strong to win the sumo wrestling with the robots and Lego pieces.
It is complicated when you're trying to do something to the robot and it just does something else, and then if you tell Mr. Fuentes to help you, he'd just be try and then.
Yeah, he wouldn't really tell us the answer to it. Say we wanted to get the iPad and we wanted to try and do the touch sensor. We'd ask him how do you do the touch sensor? He would say, figure it out on your own.
Use your imagination to do something you have never done before. That is one of the goals of the makerspace.
And so our makerspace has really transformed our school and our community. Now we have other schools that come to visit our makerspace to see what it's all about. And so our next piece was parent engagement. How do we get our parents involved? And how do we give them the skill sets that they need? And so we started to host technology trainings for them and workshops on how do you use an iPad? How do you use a Chromebook? And then how do you have discussions with your children over some of those strategies that you use? Excuse me. And so providing them with those tools and modeling, what does it look like to have a conversation over a piece of text that you just read? And so we wanted to really hone in on those skills. Excuse me. My teacher voice is not up to par. And so when it comes down to it, all of the pieces are really about building relationships and making sure that you build those connections, because ultimately relationships within your community are going to create opportunities. Building the relationships with the students creates the buy-in. And then building the relationships with the parents, that's what creates your support. And so when those moments become really tough and you're trying to figure out why you even got into this profession because it is so difficult, I want you to think of me, because I am your proof. I am the evidence that you need. I was that misguided kid that could have done anything. But because of teachers and because of at my school, I became a teacher. And if it wasn't for that, then I would have been able to start my own school. And I definitely would not have been able to be the Woman of the Year or do a TED Talk or even go and meet a former president. There's no way any of that would have happened without school and without the people in those buildings. And so now we think about what happens today. This is an aspect that we were not ready for. We had no idea this was coming, and we had huge questions. How were we going to do this virtually and remotely? And what does it look like? And there was no training. We had days to flip our school into this virtual and remote fashion. And really it became almost like survival mode. And so, okay, let's capitalize on what we were going to do. We literally deployed over 300 devices in a matter of 1 hour with a 1-day prep. And so we had very little time to plan, and initially we had planned for a 2-week, maybe 3-week shutdown. And so what we had put together was not necessarily cohesive across grade levels or anything like that. And so we had to come back to the drawing board. It's like, okay, what were our priority areas? Well, it was student engagement. How do we get them to even come to us virtually? So we had to figure out where are they right now and how do we meet them there? And then what the focus was instructional program, and then the parent engagement. And so when we think about the student engagement and getting them, we were like, okay, well, what platforms are they on? They're on YouTube, they're on Instagram. That's what we need to create. And those videos, yes, they're gonna be some instructional videos, but we gotta throw in some other stuff in there too, just to draw them in. So we had some of our more, you have those teachers that everybody loves, that doesn't matter what they do, that everybody's just gonna watch them. Okay, so those are the ones that we went to. And we're like, you're gonna do a day in the life of, and they started making their own little videos of cooking how to, and those were getting the most hits. And that's how we started to draw in. And it wasn't necessarily content. academic content, but it at least brought in the engagement. And then we were able to kind of throw in some of the academic pieces once we had them. And then those trainings, what does professional development look like? And how do we even move forward? So we do this activity that's called Mind the Gap. And we start off with, where are we currently? So we knew that all teachers were already using a learning management system called Schoology. And then we knew all of our students are also, they have their own email accounts and they know how to log into the platform because we were doing that before the shutdown. And then a lot of the assignments and projects, there were already digital components of those pieces. Was everything digital? No, but we had a pretty good grasp on what that was. Then we had to figure out, well, where do we need to be? We need all parents, students, staff using those conferencing platforms. That we had never done before. So we had to start with Zoom. Are we doing Microsoft Teams, Zoom? What is it? And how do we learn that? I had to learn it myself. And so we really started to play around with it as teacher groups. And we were like, okay, well, let's get on one conference and see what it does. And then, you know, play with different features and, oh, let's see what happens. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, then that means when we do it with students, let's not do that. And then we had to figure out the communication piece. Everything has to be digital. And so moving into that platform and that arena, okay, now we need to start marketing into, you know, the Instagram and the YouTube and sharing information in that fashion. And then creating that content that needed to be digital. And it's not something, that's the goal, right? But how do we bridge the gap? Because from where we are to where we have to be, we're not there yet. And so we had to create those, we had to train teachers. We created short little video tutorials of to how to access things. How do you share your screen? How do parents get onto the Zoom conferencing? And we had to do them in English and Spanish because for the most part, a lot of our parents speak Spanish. And so being able to navigate those pieces. We capitalized on the platforms that we already knew our kids know how to use and that they use daily. And then working as teams. So we started working as grade level teams. So 6th grade started putting together their content, 7th grade and 8th grade. And while we wanted initially to, oh yes, it would be great to streamline it across grade levels and school-wide, we were in survival mode. So to ask teachers to revamp and try to get everybody on the same exact, that's a daunting task in itself, and I was not going to put teachers in that predicament. And so we were basically trying to put something together in a structured way so that parents and students could engage in the curriculum, they could still move forward. But now as we're planning next steps, nothing's confirmed, but it doesn't necessarily look like we may be going back physically. So it looks like we were probably gonna start virtually. So now these conversations where we have the time to slow it down. Our instructional leadership is comprised of our administrators, which is just me and an assistant principal, lead teachers from every grade level, the college and career coach, and then the ed tech coach. And so the conversations now are like, well, let's look at what is working so far, because we put all this together in a matter of days and we're still refining and we're finding out what is ideal for our students. So we're looking at short daily tasks and assignments. That's where we're getting the highest completion rates. When assignments are labeled with the deadline, parents have an easier time following that, and so do students. We know that when the folders in the Schoology and the LMS are organized by the week, they can tell, okay, I have to get this done by Friday. And we're running daily and weekly analytics in terms of who's engaging on the platforms and who's not. And then we call families every week. So we have all of our support staff from our office, technicians to our paraprofessionals, our TAs, everyone is on board making these phone calls and helping to reach out to families. And then what's not working? Well, as much as we want to be a project-based school, right now, these longer projects are not working. It is really difficult to get students motivated to complete these longer projects where even though it allows for a lot of flexibility, it still is not getting the turnaround. We're not getting our bang for our buck in that area. So if we know that this isn't working, why are we going to continue to do that? We're not. So we have to revamp it. Each grade level has a different method of labeling assignments. So it becomes very difficult for us to communicate to parents. Well, in 6th grade, this is what it looks like. But if you also have an 8th grader, well, scratch that, it looks completely different in 8th grade. But the reality is, again, it was survival. And so to ask our staff to revamp all of that and to streamline it right now while you're building the plane is not a realistic expectation. And I wasn't going to put that on them. So what we had to do is really find a way to communicate to each grade level parent, okay, this is what it looks like. How do we streamline it for you so that you can understand it? And then also looking at, some are doing live conferencing and others are not. And the reality is some are super comfortable, like, yeah, let's go live and let's do this. And others are like, well, wait a minute, what if they like screenshot it and they draw ears on me and then they put it on social media? And it's like, yeah, they probably will, because it's middle school and they're not comfortable with that. And that's okay. And it's being okay with, well, okay, if you're not willing to do a live conference or a video, what if we do a screencast and it's just your voice? And so then it's like, oh, okay, I can do that. Great, let's start with that. And it's meeting people where they are. And so you're gonna have your staff on all ends of the spectrum. And it's knowing how to pull them into the direction that you need at the pace that they need. Just like students in your classroom, you have to move them along at the pace that is comfortable for them. And so as we're moving forward, we figured out 3 buckets that we really need to figure out. And that is figuring out the structure. So the Schoology landing page, it all needs to look the same across grade levels. The organization by weekend and by day has to look exactly the same for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. What it's gonna look like, I don't know yet, but we know it has to look the same. For content, the daily assignments with the flexible deadlines, because the reality is I can't say that you're gonna be on a Zoom call at 9, at 11, and then again at 2 o'clock every single day. My demographic doesn't allow for that. Parents are working, some of them are not there, they have multiple children. Wi-Fi right now is an issue. Like, there's all kinds of things that are happening in homes, and so we have to be flexible with that. And then on top of that, you know, you have staff with their own families and their own kids and their own Zoom meetings, and so we have to be mindful. And then the instructional level, that's the other piece where we're looking at, okay, it has to be at an independent level, but we have to leave room for scaffolding and for challenge. And where's that happy middle? And we don't know. The delivery, it's gonna be a combination of live conferencing, digital tools, pre-recorded video, and what does a lesson plan look like virtually? And so those are all the areas that we are exploring right now, and we are learning too. And so I'm really excited for the rest of this conference and to listen to the panelists, because I am too trying to find these ideas and trying to find these solutions to make sure that my program moving forward is going to be strong, and then also that I prepare my staff to be able to execute. And so as you move through this conference, you know, all of us have something to share, and we are all learning from each other. And so I really hope that you do engage and share your ideas and ask those questions, because sometimes just asking is going to get you really far. And so I encourage you to even reach out to me. Let's collaborate. Let's figure out how we can make this a much better experience for everybody. And so again, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to get to know some of you and to answer some questions. And so I guess I'm going to kick it back to either Brett or Tiara at this point.
Hi, Pearl. Thank you so much for that speech. I think it's so relevant and timely, and I loved what you talked about with minding the gap and, you know, really making sure you're taking each unique situation into consideration. I think, you know, right now with your backstory and the situation that we're in with students learning at home in their own environments, new challenges present themselves, and taking that into consideration is so important. Before we let you go, we have one question from the audience that came in. Sonia says, awesome presentation. I'm sure if we were at a live conference, there would be tons of clapping now. I think that's one of the downfalls of a virtual conference, is there's no like applause and immediate gratification for giving a presentation, but we're all applauding you virtually. We have one question from Crystal McDowell, and she says, when reaching out to families and families share concerns or problems, how does your team share that information, and what do you do to address those problems or concerns?
So what we have right now is a Google sheet, it's basically a spreadsheet, and it has every single student on there, and we do it by grade level. And then so everyone's able to see, and we track their engagement by subject area. So whether or not they're completing tasks, and then if they need technology, and then that's how we troubleshoot. So every week we we find out, okay, who are we calling and what is it that they need? We come into school site still a few times a week to be able to replace technology, to request more hotspots from our district. And that's been the really awesome part though, is that our district really mobilized with the technology pieces and those hotspots because our families were struggling with that. So it's that spreadsheet, and our ed tech coach actually helped us create it. Because it's like you have this vision, you're like, okay, I need to be able to see this, 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 and this all in one spot, but I don't know what that really looks like yet. And so he was able to be like, okay, let me take all those ideas and let me create a spreadsheet for you, and here you go. And so they literally week by week, they track it, they put in the notes, like got contact, didn't get contact. From all of our students, we had about 3 that we couldn't reach at all, like they just fell off the planet. And the district really helped us. We sent those out to the district, and then they mobilized their staff to be able to find like siblings and emergency contacts, and so then now they're back on the grid. And so it's really getting everybody on board to do a piece.
I think that's a great recommendation, having one place for all of that. It's also a great way to be proactive about answering those questions and concerns and, anticipating them coming in. Jacqueline asked a follow-up question to that. Can the guts of the spreadsheet be shared? I'm assuming like with outside.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely share a copy of what that looks like. That way you guys can use it, and definitely, that sounds good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your presentation. It was wonderful. We encourage you to join us and stay for the panelist discussion, which will be starting in just a few minutes. But thank you so much. We really encourage everyone who's joining us today to connect with Pearl. You have wonderful insight into remote learning and all things education. So follow her on Twitter. I know we've mentioned her a lot on our Twitter page at Dyknow. And be sure to share your words of encouragement for her on Twitter using the hashtag TechCoachCon. We love using that hashtag, so we would love to see your support for Pearl as well as for all of our panelists during this discussion. So thank you again, Pearl. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Feel free to continue joining us for the panel. All right, everyone, we are going to jump into the panel discussion. I am going to share my screen to just introduce our panelists, and then they will go ahead and turn their videos on, and we will jump into our panel discussion for today. So the reason we wanted to have a panel discussion is I think everyone is going through their own challenges right now, and we're all kind of on our own islands with remote learning and professional development. And we really wanted to talk about, what did professional development look like prior to remote learning? What has it looked like to get teachers on board with remote learning? And, what will it look like going into the summer? So I am joined today by Dr. Eric Youngman, Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment at Libertyville District 70, Amy Sharp, who is an instructional technology coach and PDC coordinator at Jefferson County Schools, a Dyknow customer, so we've worked with Amy in the past. Eric has also been a guest on our podcast, Tackling Tech. Deborah Jacoby, I'm sorry, I always mispronounce that. Computer science and educational technology teacher at Pinecrest School in Florida, and Jacob Standish, who is program manager of IT strategies at Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools, which is also a Dyknow customer. So we've worked with all of these panelists in the past in some capacity. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so you can see us all, but we are so excited to have you all here with us today. If you would all unmute yourselves, and maybe would you mind starting off with just a brief introduction to yourself, and we'll kind of go round robin and you all can introduce yourselves briefly.
Sure. So I'm sorry. I'm Amy Sharp, Jefferson County Schools in Tennessee. We're a small, mid-sized district, about 7,500 kids. My role is instructional technology and professional development. So it's been a fun couple of months. I look forward to learning along with all of you.
Greetings, I'm Eric Youngman. I'm Director of Curriculum and Instruction in Libertyville, Illinois. I guide professional development planning, where I collaborate mostly with the 2 instructional coaches and 3 technology literacy coaches to provide professional development for our staff. I gather feedback from administrators, teachers, colleagues, and research via trends on Twitter. I do mention Twitter because I believe you need a strong professional learning network so you can collaborate with rather than working in a silo. And in addition, I strongly believe that during these challenging times, we have an opportunity to redefine educational practices and mindsets for remote learning, but also in-school learning.
Yes, I'll go next. Hi, I'm Deborah Jacoby, and I work at Pinecrest School in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We have 2 campuses down here, and I'm really lucky because I'm part of a very robust ed design team. And so my focus is really not just the teaching. I do educational technology and computer science, not just the teaching for some of the elementary grades, but I also push in and do PD at the elementary level. So like Amy said, it's been very interesting kind of spinning how we are doing our PD right now, and I can't wait to hear from everybody else.
And I'll go last. I'm Jake Standish. I'm program manager of IT strategies for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. We have 150,000 students, 20,000 employees, and a very large technology team, instructional technology team, curriculum team. I kind of bridge the gap for all of that. I help translate how everything is used in each of those circles. Some of it's managing different digital tools as well as leveraging effective use of them with the instructional side of things. So I work in a lot of areas with that.
Awesome. Well, we're really excited to have you all here today. I know I've spoken with you all in the past, but you're all from different states. You all have different backgrounds with professional development and experiences with remote learning. So I as well am very excited to hear each of your perspectives with what we'll be talking about today. So like I mentioned, kind of the structure and what we want to talk about today is what did PD look like prior to remote learning and kind of how was that structure? And then obviously with this whole new remote learning environment, professional development has had to increase and be continuous throughout the semester so that teachers feel supported and are, you know, continuing their technology integration with remote learning. So what has that looked like? And then what does the future of remote learning look like going forward? What does it look like immediately this summer? And how will professional development change as we, you know, bake in remote learning into probably what will be the future of education? So to start off, I know that's kind of a loaded agenda for today, but to start off, let's talk about how did your school and district think of professional development and what were your summer preparations like prior to remote learning? Eric, do you want to start us off with this question?
Sure. I would just say, I mean, in general for professional development, we previously focused on curriculum materials and evolving state standards, as well as assessment and grading. This year, we enhanced focus on instruction as we shifted to John Hattie's research about knowing thy impact and making teaching and learning more visible. We were also focusing on feedback and priority standards. Then in March, we found out we were closing schools and learning remotely. So we had to cancel our April staff presentations that colleagues were going to be able to register for topics that interested them. This could have enhanced in-district leadership while also modeling how to value agency. We had also planned to focus on engagement for next year, but we're continuing to reevaluate that. So I guess that's a brief explanation of what professional development was. When we're looking at how we shift to remote learning, I think we've just had to continue to collaboratively and reflectively pivot. In general, we were lucky because we had a strong foundation to start with our relationships and trust and professional development. And then we scaffolded a launch to help the teachers and students and families get acclimated to remote learning. We started with 4 planning and professional development days to really launch our emergency remote learning. We help teachers navigate the online learning environments with differentiated and leveled resources, which we think is critical. And really at the beginning, when we focused on our 4 initial days, we focused on video conferring with Google Meet, as well as some sharing platforms like Seesaw and Google Classroom. And then we also just looked at differentiated on-demand video options for staff. For example, some staff might be at the novice level, some might be more competent or proficient. So that's kind of a summary of where we were and how we started with remote learning professional development.
That makes a lot of sense. Do any of you other panelists have anything you want to share on what your professional development strategies looked like, you know, last summer, maybe going into the summer, and how that looked different from how it looks now?
I'll be happy to share. So we have, we also have some days built into the school year. I'm sure that's what everyone does, but we have some summer professional development. And in the past, we had a technology day. And of course, technology being my focus, that was something that we did a lot with, right? But over the last 2 summers, we have pulled in our instructional folks. So it's really become more of a blended learning environment versus just technology. And we try really hard to make sure that any session that's coming in, it's all teacher led. And the teachers love that, right? Whatever we can learn from our colleagues is usually the best. But we make sure that we're focusing on that content, but also putting a layer of technology on top of it. So it became sort of a blended learning. Well, the plan for this coming summer, our state initiative is a look at the whole child. So we talked with some counselors in our district and the folks that are concentrating more on the, you know, social emotional learning and whole child well-being. So we're going to pull that into our summer conference as well. And we may still be able to have the conference, and we're hoping that we are, right? Because it's going to be a great one. But if not, we also went ahead and pulled in our learning management program, and we put pretty much the whole conference, each session, on the learning management program. So our initial plan was the teachers that couldn't come could still enjoy the conference, but now it may be that we all enjoy the conference that way.
So I would add to that that the focus on our professional development has been before this was very much on the curriculum, on alignment and standards, and just getting alignment across 170 schools is a challenge, but trying to get towards that. But what we're finding now is that we have a new challenge of providing feedback. It's a lot harder to do that when you're not face-to-face. And our teachers in professional development really expected that face-to-face, like I'm not learning unless I'm with the teacher. So we're having to shift a lot of the focus now to how to provide more of those meaningful struggle experiences for our learners to model that for our teachers, to then be able to use it in their learning management systems. And all of the ways they design instruction. I mean, we know the format of good learning experiences are not isolated to one particular subject matter. So how are we going to provide feedback to allow for students to struggle independently for a little bit? And then, so just modeling the effective teaching methods that we can leverage with technology today under these circumstances is definitely a big focus right now.
Hi, everybody again. So you guys all hit on different things that we're trying. Eric mentioned canceling some events, and that happens to us too. We usually run a big innovation institute where we invite other schools to kind of come learn from us. So that's been postponed a couple of times. But then for our own teachers, we do a lot of customizing of our lessons. So our ed techs, including myself, we do the trainings and go for the certifications, and then we take what we've learned and we customize it for those small group grade band levels or divisions. So that's kind of always been our style. So how that has gotten flipped right now is now when teams come to get that face-to-face that Jacob was talking about, is I'm finding that it's almost better to do similar to what we're doing now, but then have everybody be able to screen share. Because especially with technology, you just got to see what people are working on so that you can point out, no, the button's over here, or the button's not, you're not really in the right area of the screen. So we do a lot of customizing. And then you're right, for the summer stuff, we do at our school something called TTT, Teachers Teaching Teachers, which is when teachers can kind of do these 1 hour shticks about what they're good in or what they feel confident teaching in. So we're transferring that. Maybe some of the ideas we're thinking about doing some a virtual showcase where it's more going to be interview style. So what somebody in our department is going to do those interviews to kind of solicit the ideas more than it being just a 1-hour presentation. We think that we'll get more, feedback in that. And also, I guess there's one other thing that we've done in the past and is kind of changing because of what's going on, and that is, in the past, we've offered a variety of book clubs over the summer. So we've picked a variety of topics, and these are not selected by me. These are selected by other people in the design department, but they're awesome books, everything from technology and to PE classes. You want to have a variety of books so that it appeals to everybody. So what we're doing is, like Amy said, we're going to use our learning management system. We use Schoology too, and we are customizing a program for the summer. Instead of having books, we're pulling articles about what does it mean to be a distance learning teacher? What does it mean to, look at all of these tools? And in some ways, this also gives the teachers a taste of what it's like to be a student, right? So there's multiple reasons for doing that, but I think it's going to be amazing. We're not doing our book clubs, but we are trying to do things that will also be safer for us. So maybe cut down on us being all in the same room at the same time too.
I love the idea of tailoring resources to this environment that we're in now. I also, Jacob, what you said about feedback, I think that's so important, especially when you're not physically with people. I know even in my role, I need feedback more in this remote environment than I would normally. So I think communication, feedback, collaboration, those are definitely themes that we've heard in all of our conversations during remote learning. So that was a great kind of overview of what the past looked like. What has PD looked like during this time of remote learning in each of your schools in terms of, tactics, strategies, things you've provided to teachers? Jacob, do you want to go ahead and start off with this question?
Sure. So we immediately started, as a district team, started working with their constituents at the classroom level, at the school level, to offer like office hours. So I've racked up over 100 hours of webinars with technology contacts at the school, the facilitators and coaches and everything, and just being there. It was so valuable for them to just have that time to speak with humans, to have interaction for an hour every day. It was very stressful trying to answer all questions and get things routed to where it needed to be, but having that immediate need was very much present, and every department felt that pressure, and it was very well received. Then moving from that to conversations about, okay, so how do you teach right now with your students? So we would do live demonstrations, record those, share those, communicate out constantly different ways to do this. Every week we would update on a website the different professional development offerings that were provided for all of our teachers in the district, and we just kept editing it. It was a Google document at first, and just every department would put links in for, here's a link to this Canvas course, or here's a external PD that we endorse as a district and think you'd really benefit from. Just having that kind of bulletin board of things and just keep reminding everyone was just saying, this is where you go. And it created just an amazing culture, just everyone stepping up to the needs. It was quite exciting to see, and it's continuing. We're getting more organized than that, and the websites, and are leveraging some of our other platforms for offering the CEUs and everything that everyone's focusing in on. But it's really the emphasis on providing experiences that show, oh, you can do this with technology. You can collaborate and work with your learners. Just everyone's quickly learning how to do it, and it's fun to see.
I would say that we continued to build off minimum guidelines. We had some guidelines for parents about minimum expectations for synchronous instruction and asynchronous instruction and care and connectedness in office hours. And now we have a PD day on June 4th where we're focusing on blended learning, engagement, feedback, and different learning modalities. Also, a large component that kind of aligns with what Jacob is saying is about sharing different celebrations. So although we're recognizing we need to make enhancements beginning in August, we want them to reflect and share and collaboratively celebrate all the good things they've done, because this was a challenge for everyone. So that'll be a beginning component where we gathered feedback via a survey, and we'll discuss that on June 4th to really celebrate that as well. And then we're going to have some must-dos where we focus on enhancing Seesaw and Google Classroom. But then also we're really going to focus on explain everything as the teachers are trying to show and model how they're teaching. We think it's important that they can visually demonstrate. And so we're going to show them components of explain everything to build off in August. And then the teachers have some options of some may do. So they can learn about hyperdocs and different modalities and Google Slides. But again, we're trying to keep a concise vision, but while still empowering some agency as well.
So I like what Deborah said about having teachers use the tools that the students are using. That's one of the things that that really kind of, it was brought to our attention, right? That we have a learning management system. We use Canvas, and it's there if you want to use it for our teachers. It's not been mandated for them. So we have some teachers that are rocking it and really understand how to use it. And then we have some teachers who haven't really ever touched it. So we knew that one thing we needed to do was get everybody in. So as a part of our checkout for teachers for this school year, the teachers had a course on how to use Canvas, and it was created and provided in Canvas. So they actually had to work through that program as a learner. And the interesting thing was some of our teachers that are, and I will include myself in this, some of us that are proficient at using Canvas got a lot of eye-opening experience of how difficult it is to learn using the platform, right? So I think it's been a really good experience for our district, for me personally, for a lot of our teachers to go through that learning process, because it's one thing to provide students with videos and provide them with some things to read and then give them an expectation of what to do. But when you're really kind of trying to figure out exactly what that looks like as the learner, it helps you know that you have to really chunk things a little bit more than we might when we're talking about it face to face. And we have to make those expectations very clear. A screenshot of evidence might not include the evidence that you're looking for if you're not clear about exactly what that is. So I love the explaining everything, Eric, that you guys are doing, and we'll certainly making a note of that.
On our end, the two platforms that I've probably put the most hours in are Zoom and probably Seesaw. So Zoom, we started working on that about 2 weeks before we left school. So we had it, but nobody would know how to use it. So by the time school ended, we started our teaching. So it wasn't like we could just pop into someone's classroom and say, oh, by the way, here's what all these little buttons mean. So there's a combination. So we like to customize things. So the option of just like pulling links from YouTube to say, hey, you watch this 1 minute, 2 minute, we tried to make our own. So those were sent out, not just by me, but by people in my department. And then we had, like Jacob said, a lot of office hours, a lot of office hours. And, you know, sometimes it's the same people that come every time, but then it's there, it's open, and people feel like, okay, I can use it. And those people that don't feel like that's their mode of learning, they can reach out to us at another time. The other PD that I found I spent a lot of time on was Seesaw. And for anybody who doesn't use it, it's a type of digital portfolio platform. But in our case, we were really using it only for digital portfolios, which meant it had a lot of rules about what we were allowed to submit, what kids weren't allowed to submit, because it was supposed to be like their polished work, right? But we realized, you know, we have a lot of teachers that just need to get videos and photos of things. So taking off some of those restrictions really opened the doors, but then that came with a whole new set of training. First of all, there were teachers who had never used it because they weren't part of the digital portfolio training for whatever one reason or the other. Like a lot of our specialists music, art, those types of teachers, they needed a way to see the kid dance around the room if you're a dance teacher. So, I mean, that was really, really integral, that putting those screencasts together. I've been doing a lot of screencasts, and then also opening it up for those extra office hours. Doing both seemed to ease that flow, and I would recommend that for any tool, is doing both. Start off with your little presentation, and then and sometimes people would come to my office hours and say, I didn't watch that video. So what would I do during my office hours? I would just go through everything that was in the video anyways. But you know what? It was that kind of conversation that really helped people. So that's my feedback, is just, you know, people had a different range for some of these tools, and knowing that like my homeroom type teachers had a certain kind of usage of a tool that was different than the specialist, but everybody needs to be able to get and receive work from their students, and knowing that and trying to give them the best advice.
I think those are all really great takes on how your PD has been facilitated during this time. I had a conversation with, I can't remember who it was. I've had so many conversations recently, but someone was talking about how, you know, there are teachers who are at different spectrums or different ends of the spectrum with technology tools. And even though they are, it's important to, you know, make sure that students, regardless of what teacher they're interacting with, that the technologies that are being used are consistent, so that, you know, students, and same thing for teachers with PD and learning what tools they need to be using, making sure that's consistent. So I think, Deborah, that really applies to what you were saying. So then kind of going into what preparations look like going into the summer months and into next year. Deborah, I'd like to start with you, because we talked a bit about this, and I know you're in a unique situation where you might have a more structured plan than other schools, but how have your PD preparations, strategies, and expectations changed leading into summer, and what do those kind of preparations and strategies look like?
Yeah, I already give a little tasting about how we're looking at some of these virtual showcases. And so now we're looking at, well, what are those topics in the showcases? What would they look at? So we're putting together, again, not me, it's a bigger department behind, you know, everything we do, but there are people who are putting together surveys to see what is it that was most successful while you were teaching and what didn't work. And we're looking at what those topics are going to be in order to put out the PD for this maybe virtual showcase. And some things that are really important at a school that's similar to mine has what are different ways distance learning changes assessment? What are different ways distance learning changes grading? And some of these things, as an innovative teacher, they're intuitive. Some of us, like I did, a lot of my lessons had to do with menu choices, right? And that way, with a menu choice, if this kid had a printer, but this kid had a better iPad, and this kid had it, you know, it's depending on the device, I tried to give a lot of menu choices. Yes, they were learning the same skill, but how they turned it in and how they showed their work was more open. But when you do that, you have to also have the knowledge base of how do you assess that. And most importantly, for some of our families and teachers, how to grade that. So those are the types of things we're thinking about incorporating into, you know, our next kind of iteration of what PD is going to look like. Because those are the kinds of topics that teachers want to know. Is it okay to grade things differently or the same? Is it too subjective?
Anyone else thoughts on kind of what your preparation and strategies look like going into the summer and into next year?
So I'm inspired. Yesterday, our superintendent, Ernest Winston, he talked to the principals about our planning for the next year, and kind of first, let's finish strong. We are completing instruction next week and finalizing grades and everything. Just let them focus on that right this week. After that, take a break, he said. Learn something new. Then we're going to work on building next year's learning. And like, recognizing that part of our ability to prepare for next year and the uncertainty of it all and the stress of teaching right now and the stress of uncertainty with what's next month or even next week is quite real, and our teachers need to take a break. And that was, I really liked hearing him say that. But then focusing on building things, reflecting on effective teaching strategies, what's working, and where do we need to build those skills. I'm also doing surveys, like Deborah said. It's both teachers and students, and even their parents, getting the feedback from all of their stakeholders on what's the best methods, what are the best methods for instruction, what will it look like in the coming year.
And for our district, we have a variety of different task forces that are planning different situations, and I'm leading the teaching and learning task force. But if we focus on how we're teaching, as we wait to align with updated state guidance with our district needs, we recognize that some students may be in class and some might be learning remotely. So we're really supporting teachers to teach hybrid, in person as well as remotely. I think that's our shift after June 4th, where we're looking at, we need to plan and prepare the teachers for anything. And there's a good chance some teachers, some students will not be there. So let's focus on instructional strategies that can be leveraged for both of those. So that's probably my concise answer, but some of the other topics, like was already discussed, include topics like grading and social emotional learning.
Yeah, but Eric, you were right. I think that hybrid of some kids coming in and some kids aren't, that's going to be huge for PD. I mean, every teacher needs to know how to manage their time, because we don't know what that's going to look like. Every school's going to be doing that differently.
So we've also talked about the importance of, if we do get to all come back for a time, right, if we have students with us, the importance of using devices with our students. Even teachers who would typically not use those devices with their students, but getting students practical application with the devices in their hands in the classroom for the event that they may need to depend on them a little bit more again in the future. And the same thing for our teachers, right? Those that are not as comfortable using devices need to be pushing themselves to use them as much as possible so that we gain those practical application skills. Even things as simple to those of us that spend a lot of time on the computer as, saving files and uploading files and taking screenshots. They sound very simple to somebody that spends a lot of time in technology, but some of our teachers are still, they're just not there yet. And that's okay, because they're still teaching they were teaching face-to-face, and they're great teachers in that way. We've got to support them in making those steps forward. Also shifting to the future. So we used our Canvas Learning course, right, to take a look at where our teachers were struggling, and we've given them we're providing, we haven't yet, we're working on a self-reflection guide for teachers to go through and take a look at that course and say, okay, so this is what I got accomplished and I got it turned in and I can check it off. However, I really struggled with it. And so I know that I need to go back and look at this particular module that'll help me learn a little bit more about that process.
I love your point, Amy, about getting teachers to still adopt technology in the classroom once we go back to, the traditional classroom, however traditional it may be when we go back. I obviously don't work in a school, but I talk to tech coaches frequently. And last year when I started talking with tech coaches, one of the biggest challenges I heard was, that buy-in and adoption from teachers is very low for teachers who might not see a role of technology in the classroom, or teachers who don't feel comfortable using technology. And I think what I've heard throughout this remote learning time is, although it's a very hard and very unfortunate situation, one thing that has come out of it is teachers who previously were uncomfortable with technology are now using technology. And so I think it's such a great kind of question and point of, how do we continue that momentum that teachers are using technology for instruction and get that momentum into the classroom for them to adopt it in the physical classroom with students, because I think that's so important, and it really can benefit the physical classroom.
I would agree. And that's why part of the things when I started, I said, this is a challenge, but we need to use it as an opportunity, because we previously shared some of these options and resources with teachers and some would use them. Now this forces everyone to use them. So if we look at it as an opportunity to enhance ultimately student learning, it can be a win, even though it's a challenging time.
Another
And
lever
that comes
for that,
up all the time. Go ahead, Jacob.
sorry. Another lever for that is the fact that school leaders, principals, APs really don't have any other way of monitoring, of interacting with the teacher to see what they are teaching other than these tools. So using your learning management system, the principal can do a virtual walkthrough and see what instruction, what experiences are being managed by the teacher, what students are not participating, and all of that information we've been able to very quickly lift up reports and show schools, you know, this is the last time your students logged into a Chromebook, each student, so they can see, okay, these kids are logging in every day. Here's a small subset that we really have to focus on. So technology really levers the ability to scaffold the students that absolutely need our attention right now.
So looking for one thing that we haven't talked about as far as training for the future that we're focusing on is just helping teachers with ensuring that those good digital citizenship strategies are in place, as well as security and safety strategies. Those are things that I think have been put on the back burner sometimes. I mean, you know, there's a lot to teach with math and science and social studies and reading language arts. So it's tough for teachers to get all of those standards in. And I think that the digital citizenship, particularly with the online safety and student policy, is certainly going to take a step forward in the coming days as well.
Yeah, Amy, I don't know if this helps, but as an ed tech, I've just sent out a video to all the homeroom teachers, and I said, here's how you clean up your Google Drive so it'll be all ready for next year. And I sent it out, and I said, this would be great to discuss during morning meeting. I can't force it, but I'm putting the hope out there and saying, you know what, this will help everybody if we all take a minute to do this.
That's a great idea.
So we have two more questions or kind of topics to discuss. This one, so I think one of the big questions is how do we facilitate professional development while we're not together? So can you all share maybe what tools and tactics and kind of delivery methods you've used? I know we covered it a little bit, but if anyone out there is looking for, you know, a tool with which they can deliver PD to their teachers, what would you recommend? Amy, do you want to start this one off?
Sure. So our learning management system has been just huge, right? Canvas is our learning management system. We're very pleased. I've learned a lot about Canvas in the last 2 months, the last week in particular, with the course that we sent out to all of our teachers. Microsoft Teams, we're a Teams district, and the Microsoft suite of products has been very useful. We don't Zoom in our district, we team meet instead. So that's our video conferencing tool. And it's been very, very useful. We also have I'm so grateful that our technology department was forward thinking enough to get us a single sign-on option. We're using ClassLink for single sign-on. And that has helped us not only make it easier for teachers and students to reach their destination online, but also to help us kind of say, these are the things we want you to use, and these are the things not so much. So those are huge, huge tools in my world lately. And of course, Dyknow is a huge tool in our classrooms, not so much with teacher development because we can't really use it with our teachers, but it is certainly a good tool with our classrooms.
We appreciate the shout out.
I wish we could use it with our teachers, frankly.
Definitely.
I've been asked.
Anyone else, any tools that Amy might not have mentioned?
Well, I just wanted to say that I think a lot of this with the tools, especially, we have to be so careful about if you're in any one of our positions, because it does depend on your district, what's already been purchased, what you already have. I know we have kind of some policies and rules where we work, where we try not to repeat the same type of tool that does like a similar thing. And it's been really challenging because there's all these freebies out there. And I know Amy and I were talking the other day about how, you know, it's so tempting for people to try it, but then, you know, many of these things may not be, it's wonderful. We love to try things, right? I'm a techie, I want to try everything. But then remember next year, they probably won't be free. So, you know, but I'll just share from our school, we are a Google school and we use Schoology, Seesaw, and we have a variety of other just learning tools, you know. So, but yeah, I think that that's been the biggest thing, is trying to streamline and remind people, like when I get a request for another reading tool, I'll say, well, you know, we already have Reading Plus and we also have Newzilla. Can you show me how this reading tool does something different than the those two that we have? I mean, so we're really working on what's the why? What's the justification? And that helps. I can't remember who was it. It might have been Pearl who was saying that when the people go into the learning management, like Schoology, it's different depending on the grade level. So we're really, it's easier for a family if they go in and maybe the look is similar. Yeah, the teacher, every teacher has their own style, but those kind of consistency things, I think, have been really helpful with the tools.
Yeah, and I don't have much to add with tools because I'm the director of curriculum instruction and assessment, but we use Google, so Google Meet, Google Classroom, and Seesaw. So I really more focus on what can personalize learning for students. Also, what are the most impactful instructional practices? But within professional development, I think also we need to model taking informed risks and learning from mistakes. So if we can help teachers feel confident using resources and then leverage power of engagement and reflection, ultimately to empower student learning with a growth mindset, I think that's critical too. So I more focus on the instruction and then that growth mindset topic.
I would emphasize that it doesn't matter what the tool, what platform you're using, Schoology or Canvas or Google Classroom, Microsoft or Google, it doesn't really matter. It's the skills. Facilitating a webinar like this, every teacher is going to need that skill set. Recording it and communicating it to the students to be able to watch it later if they couldn't attend. Providing feedback in new ways. All of these tools can be used. So I like to give the analogy that when you take driver's ed, you're not taught how to drive a Ford. You're taught how to drive a car. And when you get a job and you have a company car, you don't get to pick what make it is. You drive the car that they give you. And you can effectively teach your students with the tools provided by your district. And there are ways.
I love that analogy.
You're here.
Absolutely, absolutely true. And the funny thing is the only consistency in technology is that there's going to be change, right? So
for
that's
sure.
Right. We talk about that all the time.
If you've been doing this long enough, you've been through the gambit of so many different tools, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy and a great point. I want to jump into some audience questions now. I know we still have one more question to kind of cover that we had planned, but I think some of the audience questions are really interesting and applicable, so I want to make sure we cover them. This first one, submitted by John, is about technology tools, so I think it fits in well to what we're already talking about. But he's asking, given that we are facing funding cuts in the fall, how much do you panelists think that having a full-featured LMS was worth paying for? For instance, you know, Schoology or Canvas, a full functional LMS that is expensive compared to, say, Google Classroom, which is free but limited.
Yeah, I can just start off just by saying, again, my focus is curriculum and instruction, and we've talked about that within our district. Funds are not an issue, but just we have chosen at this point not to do it, and we still have been functioning. But again, that's through my lens, and that's currently where we're at, but we've still been fine so far.
So I think that the learning how to facilitate learning in a virtual environment like this, I believe a full functioning learning management system is essential at this time. I know there's a lot of love for Google Classroom, but Google Classroom it's an introduction to the amount of sharing, collaborating, feedback and assessment that needs to be leveraged, and as well as the district-wide management, principals having access to every teacher's classroom. So I can give my principals access to walk into all of their teachers' classrooms without permission, just like it would be in the school building. They have a master key. They can walk into the classroom and do their observations. They should be able to know that. At the end of the day, the principal is responsible for the instruction at that school. Whether it's a physical building or a virtual environment, they need to know what is happening. And that can be leveraged far more easily with a learning management system that you would pay for. Google Classroom, yeah, I know it is free in a way. Now, we're a Google district. I definitely know what we can get is extensive for what we don't pay. But at some point, as it evolves, I can see Google Classroom becoming a full-scale product, and it will be a priced product. That's my speculation. At some point, if you want a full functioning LMS for Google Classroom, you'd pay for it as well.
And just to tag into what Jacob's saying, keep in mind too, and again, this is going to depend on different resources within different places, but privacy issues. So yeah. We don't, you hear about some of these Zoom bombers or break-ins to different things. We've cut a lot of that down because everything is behind several passwords. So that is a bonus when you have an LMS that's really set up and structured properly. So yeah, there is a cost associated, and there are people who do love that Google Classroom, though. I'm not going to lie. We have teachers that, even though we really want them to use the LMS, they find there's an application within it to use like both almost.
So, and I'll speak to it from a Microsoft point of view as well. So I was adamantly opposed to Canvas, to be honest with you, when we first got it, because I felt like Microsoft could do so many of the same things and it was an added expense. But since we've gotten the program and I see how easy it is to take a module and duplicate it, and in the way that Pearl was talking about creating structures that are consistent across the district or a school, that's very difficult to emulate in a Microsoft platform. There's so many options inside of those Microsoft and Google's, right? You have so much autonomy that it's hard to keep things completely structured. And our LMS, and I'm sure they're all very similar. We looked at several great products, but the ability to keep things consistent in that LMS, and like you said, for principals to be able to see what they need to see within their buildings, and for teachers to be able to share their classrooms for a time. I really do. I can't believe it, but I have moved over to the drinking the Kool-Aid of I love our Canvas now. I really do love our LMS. I'm glad we have it right now. I'm glad we have it at this time.
Yeah, I think that question is a really timely question too, because I think this time has really caused technology teams to evaluate what tools are necessary and what might just be frills that they can cut out of their budget, or even if they're free, can just cut out of, their teacher's technology suite so they're not overwhelmed. So I really like that question. I think your answers are all very applicable. So another audience question from Raquel: how did you approach true integration? We are trying to get there in our district, and so far it has remained separate. I'm in technology and can't seem to get them to see how we can be combined.
We've already talked about the spectrum of teachers, right? That there's different. So I'm not sure if there is ever true integration. Like, I'm not sure if that happens. I think it was Amy said before about how, I know something that comes up a lot of times in our meetings where I work is we just don't want to go backwards. So that's the way, when you say like true integration, I look at it as they've learned all the tools. Let's keep moving forward and keep using them.
I've made a career out of bridging the gap between those two aspects, and what it is it's relationships with the teams involved. A lot of technology teams for a school district don't come from the classroom, but they are there because they believe in the education of students. They believe in our children and they want to do what's best for them. They come at it with a different perspective, of course. Their technology career and all the things that they've learned that are dangerous about technology, they want to leverage. But when you can communicate with from their perspective, learn their perspective, and also share the educator perspective and why this is important, that's where you can really get that synergy to bridge the gaps, to get everyone moving in that direction. You have to have that relationship to get to hard yeses, to solve things that we know are in the best interests. But it's a long road, and that's the job. That's what it turns into.
So I'll add to that, Jacob. I think we did a great book study this last year of Weston Kishnick's book, Bold School, and it talked about the importance of starting with instruction, with old school teaching, how teaching the standards. And I know you spoke to, I think you spoke to Hattie a little bit, Eric, earlier. Starting with standards, starting with outcomes, starting with what we want our students to know, and then taking the technologies that will enhance that learning or deepen that learning and layering them on top of instruction. I think that was a big aha moment for me, because I am from the classroom environment. I was a principal, and I kind of shifted gears and started saying, okay, well, let's push this technology, and this is what we purchased. So I need to teach teachers to use these things, and they have to be using them. And I honestly shifted my gaze from that instructional piece first to the technology piece for a moment. But I've come back around to, we really do start with the instruction, and then we layer on top of that. Sometimes there's not a tool that works really well for what we need to do, right? And we just have to teach old school, real just teaching ways, right? And that's okay. So just be aware that, was it Rachel, Raquel, that you are not on your own. We are all right here with you. Nobody is there.
Yeah, and I would echo what Amy said, just it starts with that impactful instruction. Sounds like Jacob loves the word leverage like I do. Then if you can leverage technology to enhance that, and then what I would add is just modeling that within professional development so they can experience it like a student, what the benefits truly are. Because if they see it, if you can have other colleagues modeling the benefits of it, then they'll believe it. And again, it's an opportunity now to do that.
Yeah, Jacob, I think what you said especially is so timely. Bridging the gap is always going to be the issue. I don't think we can ever really close the gap. So, and Amy, like you said, technology is always changing. So I think like true integration might never be possible. Okay, another question, and this gears more towards remote learning rather than professional development. I don't know if it applies to all or any of you, but if it does, would appreciate any insight. So this is from Brad, and he asked, does your school or district hand out hotspots to families that need Wi-Fi or internet connection? How do you handle families that seem to be indifferent about virtual learning, students getting on meetings and doing work? We have parents that seem apathetic about their students learning from home.
I would say it's a good question. We're lucky in our district. There's minimal needs for that, but we did distribute hotspots to the few families that needed them. But the second part of the question to me is very pertinent, because as we shift to next year, we're really focusing on that accountability for the student, the teacher, and the parent. I think if we establish guidelines for teachers, we have that accomplished. But that accountability for students and parents was really a big topic when we talked about in Illinois not assigning grades. So we are going to focus on that. And I think part of our focus will be on some professional development for parents and almost creating some sort of an agreement. This is what the teacher must do. This is what the expectations are for the parents and the students as well. So accountability will be our focus.
I would say, I would add to that maybe relationships. I'm sorry, Jacob.
Oh, you're fine.
Relationships. I mean, those same parents that are perhaps apathetic with virtual learning may be the same parents that were apathetic when the student was in the classroom. So just because we shift to a virtual world doesn't mean that we shift away from the relationships and the constant home school communications that we've always needed.
We distributed a lot of hotspots, and we've been very fortunate to have partnerships with different providers for those, and it's been great. But I would say another aspect of that is that, like Pearl mentioned, the need for consistency when the learner and their parents go into to see the expectations for learning. We, like, Canvas has parent or observer account access, so we've seen a huge influx of that, and having it one place where both the student and parent go to see the learning happening has really shown the adoption, the shift over has been very widely accepted. The distribution, the logistics of distributing hotspots has been a big effort, and what we've been able to reorganize our work staff to help with that. We've loaded school buses with Chromebooks and hotspots. So our students were told that you can't come back to school over the weekend. Like, we didn't have a choice. We didn't get to take our Chromebooks home, or we were going to take 3 days to really concerted get 150,000 Chromebooks home, and that plan got destroyed. So there were a lot of students that didn't have any Chromebooks at home to start with. So we were deploying, just running buses to neighborhoods and checking them out, and all of that was happening. It's a huge logistical task, but it's the right thing to do. Was definitely the mindset where there's no regrets on what we've done. We're making it work for sure.
Definitely. I think that's good insight. So to wrap this up with one last question, I would love if each of you could provide a piece of advice for other technology teams or technology coaches preparing professional development going into the summer and going into next year. Any advice from what you've learned or what we've talked about today? Eric, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I would say 3 things. So I would say effective professional development for remote learning isn't about using the fanciest tool, or Jacob may say driving the right car, but it's about being aware of the range of options and implementing practices that have strong research support with students at the right time. I would also say professional development should empower teachers in similar ways that students are empowered. So by differentiating and providing opportunities for agency via choice and voice, I really think that's a critical component. And then finally, in the keynote, Pearl mentioned how the direction of her school changed when there was a new principal. So that comment to me emphasizes the importance of connecting with a common vision and identifying why and the goals and expectations. So for example, my school district frequently connects almost everything to the applications of learning. And that focuses on communication and teamwork and problem solving and making connections and self-direction. So rather than this is a whole nother thing, well, now it's just remote learning, we're going to connect to those components we already frequently discuss.
Yes, I'll go. So 2 things that came to my mind. One is I'm a really big believer that PD is not one size fits all. So I've worked at lots of different, I've worked at a couple different schools, and what worked for me in one school does not work for me in another school. So take our ideas and then think about your community of teachers and their level of expertise and their level of buy-in, and think about, well, maybe I do have to customize it, but no. Maybe it does need to be a video. And maybe you have 2 or 3 different tools or 2 or 3 different ideas that you want to push out, but maybe they need to be shown in different ways, but you have to know your population. That's a big takeaway. And then the other thing is start now. Start now. I told Tiara this, we have like a plan A through F at our school, everything from full-on distance learning to we are back in school, happy-go-lucky, to those hybrids that are in between. But someone has to write those things up. And so get together with your teams and think about how that's going to look. So start now.
So I would also say I love what Jacob's superintendent said, which was take a break. I think that honestly, everybody needs just a little bit of a brain break at some point this summer to refresh and recharge. So I would echo that. And also say get comfortable with failing forward. I start almost every session that I do with teachers online saying something's going to go wrong on this Teams meeting. I almost guarantee you something will go wrong. Be okay with that. I'm okay with that, right? Be okay with that.
Yeah.
Professional development does need to be differentiated, just like student learning is differentiated. And it also is ongoing. It's not something that we can one and done at the beginning of the year. It's going to take ongoing support. So those are
very good. Eric actually said it earlier, celebrate the victories, reflect on and communicate those successes. Definitely a key part of it, but also, I mean, reflect on and communicate the failures too. That's part of learning. Good friend of mine and colleague, Justin Keene, said, embrace the struggle that comes from true learning. And that's like the success when you really struggled and figured it out is so meaningful. And the same as when you figure out you took the wrong approach, that when you have internalized it, that's where true learning is. And so communicating, being honest with your professional development, that this will be difficult. This is not how you're used to teaching. It's not how you're used to learning, but you can do it. And we will struggle through it and we will be better from it.
Definitely. I think, Amy, what you mentioned and what Jacob mentioned earlier about taking a break is so important. Deborah and I had a conversation last week about how, you know, schools are unsure if they'll even provide professional development over the summer to an extent, because teachers have been so kind of under the wire with being involved in professional development for the past few months and really do need that break. And I think giving teachers a break, but also giving yourselves a break. We all have been so, you know, working from home, it increases the lack of separation between work and home life. So I think taking a break, enjoying the summer, and making sure that we mentally, emotionally are good to go when school returns, whether it's remote or in a physical state. I think this conversation has been really, really great. I appreciate all of your insight and being here today. We will be hosting an event at the end of June that will be announced at a later date, but we are intending for that event to be more tactic-based for how you can develop professional development going forward for the next school year. So for everyone who's joining us today, keep an eye out for that. And for all of our panelists, if you would like to, we would love to have you back for that event as well. Thank you all for being here today. We will provide the recording to everyone who registered for the event. So if you couldn't make it for the whole event, we'll send it to you, as well as a link to request a professional development certificate of attendance. Thank you all for being here today. I know I've said it 3 times already, but we appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend and good luck with the end of the school year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody. It's been great.
Bye. Have a good weekend.